Welcome to the DRS Train podcast. This service is the DRS Awards for 2023. I'm your driver, Peter Brook, and your conductors today are Nav F1 and recurring guest, the casual F1 fan. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Peter. Looking forward to wrapping up this season with the awards.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. Let's talk about Formula One 2023 for the last time.
Yes, last time for a very long time, I think. So,
Yeah.
we've summarized everything pretty well, I think, in our previous 3 episodes covering each team and driver and team principal individually. So now it's time to have some fun doing some awards. So the first award we've got coming up is Race of the Season. So candidates we have Australia, Zandvoort, Singapore, Vegas, Brazil, or possibly any others. So what are you guys thinking?
Um, so personally, I missed the Dutch Grand Prix because I was looking at other kinds of cars going around at Silverstone that weekend. And I think that was a big let off because that race was fantastic when I rewatched it. I think that was one of the best ones out there, especially because of the tricky nature of the track and also the fact that there were many compounds used. It rained, then it stopped raining. We don't have those a lot nowadays, where so many compounds are used. Drivers are just sliding about. The start of the race was great because no one could find grip. Some drivers did find grip, like Alonso. Then bad pit stop calls, good pit stop calls. I think that was a good one. And obviously, the other really good one was Singapore, for reasons that I'm sure you're going to enunciate. One that I think gets forgotten because of how long ago it was in such a long calendar, such a big calendar, is Australia. Because the Australian race, yes, Verstappen just went went off. But the battle between, I think, Gasly, Sainz, Alonso, Hamilton, I think it was those four. That was from P2 to P5 for what was it, 40 laps of the entire race. It was fantastic because you had four drivers for four different cars, all following each other, not thanks to DRS, but thanks to actual grip. Alpine being up there for the first time in the season, we thought maybe they could do something. In the end, it ended in a big crash between them, which was the most Alpine thing to do. But yes, I think Australia gets forgotten. And those were my two picks in terms of races of the season personally, because I know that Singapore is an obvious one.
Yeah. So in my view, I mean, if I talk about it, the race that I loved the most, the one that probably out of the 22 races this season, the one that I've seen it twice or thrice, it's the race in Vegas. I, massive surprise after the kind of weekend that was. Because, look, in all honesty, the track is it's generic street track that we've seen a lot of times now in F1. Miami is similar. Probably Jeddah is also something similar as well. But the racing was quite fun, and I think probably the only race where we've seen Max Verstappen being passed on pretty much on same tires, same strategy, and everything. And that was a bit of a novelty for me. I mean, Singapore as well, to an extent, was a bit of a surprise because I that was probably the one race where we did not know who was going to win until the last lap. Probably 2 laps, 2 to 3 laps before the end, we had an inkling that Sainz would win. But still, that was one race where there were options. I mean, we can go and talk about Australia, Zandvoort, Brazil, and others. The thing that was quite the common theme with all of them was that you knew Max was going to win, and then there were the others. In Vegas, there was still some battle, plus Leclerc's overtake on the very last lap over Checo. That was very impressive. Then even in Singapore. So yeah, I think somewhere I do think I agree with you, Nav. But for me, Vegas is the one that stands out. I mean, if there was no safety car, Ferrari would have won and Leclerc would have won. And if Sainz had not been given that stupid penalty, there's also even a bigger argument to be made that Ferrari could have had a 1-2 finish in that particular race. So yeah, for me, the best race has to be Vegas. Singapore is probably the second one.
Yeah, for me, the two that stand out the most are Zandvoort and Singapore. I mean, Zandvoort, the middle phase, very little happened. Obviously, the beginning, first time we've had proper rain in a long while, and it kind of threw everyone off. And it mostly kind of annoyed me though because the teams were being so bad with strategy and obviously just had no clue how to approach the rain and were just trying to work out when they should and shouldn't pit, and then we're just not realizing how much time that the drivers were losing by making them stay out longer than they should have and costing them huge amount of positions. And then again, rain comes back at the end. Singapore obviously stands out because it was the only race that Red Bull did not win. And it ended up being a very close fight for the win, not involving Red Bull at all. But the other one I do want to point out is Monza, because that had some very interesting fighting with Ferrari, of course. Several times they
Yes.
almost collided, and then of course Piastri and Hamilton did collide. I mean that as a race, even though easy win for Max, but otherwise I think that one had a lot going for it as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't really considered it. I think a lot of the races basically before October are now hard to remember, and that's don't want to go on a tangent on the calendars. We know how long they are, but yeah, it's not normal that even as hardcore fans, we have to think hard about the races to remember the memorable ones, because yeah, it's just hard to think about the races before the break. Australia stands out, and I think it was the best race of the first part of the season. But I guess if we're still focusing towards the end of the season, where most things happen because of McLaren just finding pace, there's also Brazil that we have thought about, because Brazil was interesting with the strategies. Obviously, Alonso and Perez making a fight of something that shouldn't have been a fight. I don't think Perez should have been that slow and Alonso should have been that fast. That fight shouldn't have happened in the first place, and it made the race that I think could have been a bit boring in the last third quite good. And another one that I think we might be forgetting is Monaco, because when it started raining in Monaco, that made the race fun at least. And one strategy call made an instant one strategy call prevented an instant classic, because I think if Aston Martin puts intermediates on Alonso's car, then that race becomes extremely famous for Alonso winning at 42 and 10 years after his last win, but they didn't. So a lot of close calls, I think, this year in terms of races that could have become classics and didn't. And in the end, we just have Singapore as a race where Red Bull didn't win.
I think even we forget Qatar was also nice, both the sprint and the race, because we had a completely different rule set where only a limited that we had on a particular set of tire. So you had drivers pushing throughout the race, and yeah, of course, again, almost like every race this year, Max would tend to cruise away, cruise at the front, and had pretty much no challenge. But even he was measuring himself quite a few times. And of course, Oscar had a good one. Lando had a good one. Russell, after the shenanigans on the first lap with Lewis, he made his way through the entire field, finished P4. I think Alonso had a decent race. Then the overtake between him and I think it was Charles Leclerc. So yeah,
Yeah,
overall it was eventful. Again, look, the something that you touched on as well, having 22 races is a concern because every race kind of meshes into one. But the bigger problem is that when there is a singular pattern that is being followed in every race, it becomes a bit tough to separate them and remember what really happened. Max winning and someone coming second and third is pretty much what happened this season, so that tends to get a bit, I agree, a bit boring and hard to recall.
So it seems like we've all kind of come to different conclusions about what we think is the best one.
which would be your favorite then, Peter, and then Casual?
Of the three I mentioned, I think the best one, I think it is Singapore.
I
Yeah,
guess
I'll
Vegas for Casual.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, it's expectation versus reality. I expected a shit show in Vegas, to be honest, after the kind of weekend that was there. I expected a lot of stoppages, some other issues, maybe fans being thrown out again from the grandstands. Fortunately, none of that happened. We had a good race. We had a race where Ferrari did not mess up with the strategy. So yeah, overall, I had great time watching Vegas personally.
Right. I think I'll still stick with Zandvoort because I really love changeable conditions and I like how some drivers shine through in those situations. Well, yeah, we had quite a few good races despite Verstappen dominating in terms of wins. So it's time for us to look at the next award, which is the worst race of the season, because we've also had some absolute stinkers. Um, Interesting that on the slide Vegas is an option, which Casual will disagree with big time just
I
after he has. I guess as
I
a
feel
weekend,
offended.
it was a bit of a shambles.
Oh yeah, the
I think,
weekend was a shit show. The weekend was an
yeah,
entire shit show. So
exactly. So the weekend wasn't great. The race was good. Spain, Abu Dhabi, Miami, Qatar, the other options. Qatar, I don't really agree with. Spain, Abu Dhabi were not great, but Miami, I just want to start on Miami. Miami nearly made me consider not watching any other 2023 race. And I'll tell you why. I was watching that race at night on a Sunday. And at some point, all the teammates were following each other. The entire top 10, apart from Lance Stroll, who had messed up his qualifying, I think, was just behind his teammates. So the entire top 10 was, I think, I can't remember correctly. I think it was Red Bull, then Alonso, then Mercedes, then McLaren, then Alpine, and then Stroll was in 10th, I think, at some point in the race. It was so boring. So Max had to like make up places, but apart from that, I was so scared that the entire season would be Verstappen, Perez, Alonso for as the podium for the remaining 15 races. Obviously, that didn't happen. McLaren came back, Mercedes came back, Aston Martin fell off. But that race was atrocious to me, at least.
okay, so in my view, it was a bit of a slow burn, but I think Baku was pathetic this time around. We had I I think we had one or two overtakes overall. I think Stroll overtook George Russell probably. That's the only one that I can remember. We had this huge train of cars behind Ocon who did not even pit until the last lap and ended up finishing outside points. Then we had a lot of races. I mean, a lot of times where, of course, there was a battle for the win between Max and Sergio, but it was a lot. I think after the first 10 to 15 laps, you could tell that Sergio had it in control, and there wasn't much going to happen. For me, again, it comes down to the expectation versus reality thing. The expectation from Baku tends to be, well, we'll have an interesting race. There'll be something happening. Not much happened, even though Nick DeVries tried his best by crashing out. But still, that was a bit of a meh, not fun race, to be honest. Baku was probably one race that actually had me alarmed that maybe this season is going to be a bad one in terms of even on track action as well.
Yeah, Baku was your Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the ones listed. They've all it's quite different reasons for being on there because Spain was just a generally uneventful race, which it usually is. I don't think Abu Dhabi warrants being on there. I thought that was actually relatively, but by Abu Dhabi standards, I thought it was a fairly decent race. Vegas, yeah, a mixture of cringe and also just unpreparedness with how practice went. Miami, full cringe. Qatar, just yeah, again, unpreparedness of putting the tire restrictions in and then the intense heat and everything. It's just that's a failure of organization. Although the race itself was not bad and the sprint race was actually very good, but Baku as well. Baku, I think, is bad because it gave us the illusion of a title fight, is how I'd describe it. Because Perez actually did genuinely was faster than Max, but the problem we had was that the sprint race perfectly previewed the race because Leclerc got pole in both, and he got passed at the same place on probably the same lap in both
Yeah.
races as well. And it's like, well, we know we said this on the sprint. It's like, okay, that's going to happen tomorrow. But yeah, I suppose one thing, another lack of organization thing we saw in Baku that some people may have forgotten is on the last lap when Ocon pitted and nearly ran over all
Yeah,
those photographers in the pit
Yeah.
lane.
one thing on Baku is that wasn't that the race where Alonso predicted Verstappen to go in the lead on lap 25, and it was on the exact lap 25 that he got the lead. I think that was
No,
the race where
Miami. That was Miami, I think.
No, yeah, that was Miami because at Baku, I don't think he did get the lead because he pitted just before De Vries's safety car.
So
No, no.
no, I think it
Max was
was
in the lead.
exhausted.
Checo closed up. Then Nick De Vries had his crash. Then Max pitted.
That was
Then
South.
Checo got the advantage.
But yeah, that was just a wider point on how, yeah, the start of the season in terms of Red Bull pace was so predictable that drivers could just predict and get it right if you knew enough about the strategies and all. Yeah, the start of the season was scary. I think it improved a lot with the competitors who came about.
Yeah.
So yeah, so your worst races would therefore be Azerbaijan and Miami, I guess.
Yeah. Miami pissed me off. I didn't talk about it, right? Miami did piss me off because that was I hate one thing about these new tracks. And the biggest thing is that earlier, remember we had these Tilke domes, uh China, uh, Malaysia, India, Korea, all these tracks, they have these long straights, but even but most of the times only these long straights are not the parts where you can pull off an overtake. You can pull off an overtake in the corners as well because the tracks are wide enough. Now, what we have with Jeddah, with Miami, probably to an extent with Vegas as well, is that you have to have great top speed to pull off overtakes. Like, for instance, the Red Bulls of 2010 to 2013 would not be successful if somehow they had a bad strategy and they started the race within the field because they could never pull off overtakes. And that's something I truly don't like about these new tracks, and Miami is actually one of them.
Mm.
Yeah, I can see why. Because like they add tracks where you cannot overtake, and then you get your successful drives, as we will see later with Albon, just because he has a great top speed. But those should be one-offs. It should not
Yeah.
just be a strategy for a car or for a driver to be like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna go on mediums for 45 laps and block everyone because I know I can block everyone, and then people are going to remember me as one of the great drive. Remember my drive as one of the great drives of the season. It's good for the driver, but it's not good for the sport.
Yeah. I mean, just remember, I think next year we'll be there. Shanghai. Lewis used to pull off these beautiful overtakes in corners where you had this great fast right hander, and he used to get that done. Now there are no such sections. The track actually the thing is now we have street tracks, which again, and I'm my another pet peeve that they suck. They should not be there. And we'll have 8 out of 24 street tracks in 2025 probably. They just kill the sport. For you to have good speed, you need to have a strong engine and a great low downforce setup. Right now, success in Formula One, that has become your key recipe. I'm just not a fan of it because variance is dead, and just not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, I said in
Yeah,
my manifesto video that I think a maximum of 25% of races can be street circuits.
yeah.
And that's also if you count
There's,
like Albert Park counts as a street circuit in that case. And yeah, so that takes up one
Yeah,
already.
Monaco,
that would
Singapore.
they're getting Madrid on, which, well, to be fair, the Catalonia track is not a big loss because recently it's not been great, has it?
It has
But
never been great since
yeah,
forever. Pretty shite
It was
races,
good in
honestly.
'96 because it was wet.
it was good
And
in
in,
2013 because tires were still weird and some drivers were better than others at heating up the tires. But
Yeah.
yeah,
and in
Alonso's
2012,
last race,
because
by the way. Alonso's last race win,
yeah, and
2013.
yeah,
2012 it was good because we got a win which may have been a setup, I don't know, or a conspiracy to make for whatever reason, but it's something.
exactly. And they want to replace it with the Madrid circuit, which literally has a roundabout, from what I have
It,
seen on
it's
the
a
limit.
Formula E circuit. It looks the same as the Rome E Pre track.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
roundabout.
yeah.
There is a roundabout. It's incredible.
Well, the
Anyway,
Vietnam, the Hanoi circuit was had a roundabout as well.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
forgotten track. I think that's going to be in most icebergs from YouTubers in 15 years.
Oh yeah,
Well,
yeah.
good that Casual spoke about the lack of overtakes, because the next award is the overtake of the season. Because when it didn't involve Max Verstappen, we had a lot of good overtakes. I would say actually check out my Nav F1 overtake video on YouTube. If you haven't, it's much better than the F1 list. But yeah, there were good overtakes, and just going into some of them, Alonso featured in a lot of them, either overtaking or getting overtaken. Once again, kind of shining through as this guy who doesn't crash in battles because he gives space, and even when he gets overtaken, he just allows it. Even when it's Ocon this year in Singapore, or yeah, I think the overtake on Hamilton and Bahrain really was the star of the season for most people, because we hadn't seen a switchback in that way at that turn possibly ever. I don't think at turn 10 in Bahrain we saw a switchback there, because of how hard that turn is to take usually. But yeah, a lot of really good overtakes around the outside this season as well. So Stroll on Sainz, Ocon on Tsunoda, Ocon, who had incredible overtakes this season, that has gone completely unnoticed by the F1 pages for some reason. But if you look up
He's not
a
famous.
compilation,
That's why. He's not
exactly, he's
famous.
not because he doesn't generate clicks, which is sad because Ocon had some incredible overtakes this season, especially at Spa, where I think you could make a compilation of Ocon at Spa just by
Yeah.
himself.
I mean, yeah, if we can go through these singularly, but I mean, I just in just going ahead with your point, I think Ocon was the best overtaker this season. I have so many of his overtakes, his overtake on Piastri in Australia, his overtake on Albon in Spa, his overtake on Yuki in Spa, his overtake on Alonso in Singapore, and his
And
overtake
Perez,
on and
and
Perez,
Perez,
right? And his overtake on I think Alonso again in Qatar. So there are five that could make any list. I mean,
yeah,
even though he had pretty, I think it was an average season overall for him because he had far too many DNFs. But in terms of on track action, he fared quite well.
I don't remember any of these overtakes, so I'm just going to say Alonso and Hamilton in Bahrain. So I remember that one. I can't remember any of the others. I don't remember. I don't remember Ocon making any passes on anybody. I definitely don't remember Norris passing Sargent in Belgium. Yeah.
yeah. Even I don't remember that one. But yeah, generally, I think Ocon and Alonso had some very good overtakes this
Yeah.
season. One of my favorite ones was definitely, as I said, Stroll on Sainz, because the way he just looped around the outside of Sainz at this huge curved corner. I don't know which turn that is. Maybe Peter, you know which actual number that is at
Oh, the
Jeddah.
ben the banked one at the
Yes,
end. Yeah.
exactly. God knows what term that is in terms of numbers, but that was very satisfying because he just feathered the throttle and went around the outside all the way. Ocon on Tsunoda again. I'm around the outside merchant in terms of overtakes. I love those ones.
Mhm.
And Ocon on Tsunoda was risky, calculated, and it worked out. But
Yeah.
Alonso against Hamilton was a common occurrence this year. So there was Bahrain, obviously, but Canada, Japan,
I think
and yeah, just
Canada did not get the kind of love that it should. I that was very he had to be very precise with the way he overtook him.
that's
Somehow,
interesting because
right?
I wasn't a big fan of. Well, I was happy with the overtake, but I thought it was it was good placement, but a lot of DRS. What did you think?
For me, the thing was whatever I saw with it, because what happens is, thanks for F1 TV, you can go back and take a look at these onboards. So Alonso planned this thing 3 to 4 laps earlier, where his exit from the I don't know what from the hairpin was probably different on all these laps. So he was experimenting different things. On the lap where he overtook Lewis, he was able to take an entirely different line, and I think it was for the first, I mean, in the last 5 laps, where you could see that he had more intent in terms of pulling a move. Now you compare it with his last 4 laps where he was throwing dummies. He was basically trying to see how Lewis would react, whether he will flinch towards the inside or he will keep his line. when finally he had the idea, he pulled off the move. And it takes a lot of tactical, when you're pulling a move against Lewis on such a track, because look,
Yeah.
on paper it does appear that it was a simple DRS move, but in Canada both had similar tire life, whereas in Bahrain Lewis's tires were short. So that is also a difference. So when you take all of these things into consideration, I felt probably in terms of details, maybe the Canada one was better.
Yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, I do remember that it looked like Alonso could be stuck behind Hamilton for the entire race, actually. And if he doesn't make that pass, he finishes third. So it is as simple
Remember,
as
it
that.
happened with him in Australia as well, where he was just stuck behind Lewis, couldn't really do anything.
Yeah, exactly. And Australia was a very close call as well because Alonso was catching up to Lewis,
Yeah,
and then the safety car happened when Magnussen crashed. So
yeah,
that changed a lot because I think without that, Alonso would have gotten podiums in the first 6 races, um, and would have ended the season with 9 podiums, which is more than what any other team other than Red Bull achieved. So, yeah, those small calls matter a lot. I would still go with Alonso versus Hamilton as my personal pick. I know that Leclerc on Perez got overtake of the year thanks to Leclerc fans raiding the polls in I think 2 weeks ago. What did you think? What did you guys think about that Leclerc overtake on Perez? Was it as majestic as some people say it was?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was good. The stakes were high. I think it was more a bit similar to, it evoked emotion, and that is why it got the award, to be honest. But even in that particular race, I think the move that Lewis pulled on, I think it was Alonso or Stroll, where he pulled the move on the last corner and overtook him on the inside. And it was a
Troll.
very it's a very fast left-hander, and I mean, I felt, oh shit, he's going to crash because it was so fast and he still made it stick. I felt for the very particular race in Vegas, that was the one that should have actually gotten the recognition. It didn't. But I don't really mind.
Mm.
Leclerc Perez was nice. Plus, we have to keep in mind that you're trying to overtake a Red Bull, and Red Bull is no slouch. So him getting that done, I don't have too many issues with it. It's okay. I mean, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as what was it from Lewis last season? Through goes Hamilton. At least it's not through goes Hamilton. Until it's that, I'm fine with it.
I mean, it's the longest straight we've had in nearly 50 years, so it's kind of hard not to overtake there, especially when you factor in DRS as well.
So for you, it was really just a bit trivial.
Yeah, it was all right.
That's
It was
fair.
like overtaking at turn one at Baku. It's like, well, of course you are. You've been redlining for like 10 seconds before you get there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's also why I didn't find. Well, Leclerc on Perez was late braking and lost lap, but yeah, it's the same reason why I didn't choose Alonso on Perez, which I just realized is not on the slide.
Yeah,
Alonso on Perez in Brazil as my overtake of the year because it was incredible that he overtook a Red Bull, but end of the day, it was Perez not placing his car well, Alonso placing the car well, and then DRS. So
yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's nice.
that's a good segue from Perez not defending well because the next award is the Disgrace of the Year, where he is a prominent nominee along with Ferrari and Alpine. Now, yeah, Peter, who would get your pick, and do you have any other nominees apart from those three?
I think Checo. I mean, Ferrari this year were not as bad as they could have been. I mean, because they were never really in a position to fight for titles, that helps them look better because there were fewer opportunities to screw things up. But Alpine, yeah, it's lots of obviously on track. It's mostly fairly dull because it's just them and them fighting by themselves, but being relatively stable. At least it's more that just off track they can't help but keep firing everybody all the time. But Checo, yeah, I mean, it's one of the worst performances in one of the best cars we've ever seen. In every other time that we've had cars as dominant as this, the second driver has never been this bad. He just,
What
yeah.
are some of the other years you have in mind for that stuff?
So I'm thinking in terms of things like, for example, Patrese at Williams, Bottas at Mercedes, Webber at Red Bull, Barrichello at Ferrari. Like they were a hell of a lot closer to whoever the lead driver was than him, and the points gap wasn't anywhere near as large. I mean, the closest, I think, 2002, Barrichello had just over half of Schumacher's points, as opposed to Checo having just under half of Verstappen's. But they weren't, qualifying like 6 or 7 rows behind him and finishing races like in outside the podium when he was cruising to victories or anything like that. It's been, there hasn't been a discrepancy this big with such a dominant car before.
I think, yeah, to an extent, probably the worst that I've seen in terms of number two driver. I think the worst has to be Ricardo Patrese against Mansell. That's probably the worst. Uh, the gap was too big between the two drivers. But uh, in recent times in modern F1, I mean, we are probably forgetting one. Rosberg 2015 was not that good until the last 3 races that he won. uh, Everyone forgets Hamilton won the title from Sebastian Vettel, not Rosberg. That is still people. I mean, if you've not watched the sport, you've not seen it. I mean, I remember vividly that I think Vettel was around 4 or 5 points ahead of Rosberg when Lewis sealed the title. So that is one that stands out to me because Rosberg is even today rated very highly. But probably that is one. Do you guys think that one of the reasons why Checo gets so much slack is probably because the car is this is probably the worst possible car that he could have when it comes to expressing himself, because his strength is race, and his weakness that has been there since forever is his qualifying. And if you hand him a car that is poor in qualifying and a strong race car, then that kind of magnifies his weaknesses and leaves him a bit leaves him with a little too much to do in the race.
Well, yes, and that also makes me think about this wider opinion I have on Perez, where in 2020 at Force India, when he was stellar in races, thanks to the car, as you said, being set up for him to be good on race pace and tire strategies and good at defending, when he was really good there, everyone was a Perez fan. Everyone wanted him to get a drive because he could have been out of F1. And he was getting praised so much. And then it shows how quickly F1 moves, because 2 years later, everyone's just going into him saying race fans put him as the 19th best driver, or should I say second worst driver on the grid this year. Setup matters a lot, confidence matters a lot. And yes, Perez was disgraceful this season, but as you said, setup goes into play, and you can't just assume that a driver will lose so much space after 2 years, especially at his age. He's not 45, he's what, 34, 33, 34. So yeah, he has been very bad this season. But when some people are trying to analyze Checo's entire career because of his performance in 2023, that you cannot analyze a driver's career over a season. It can define what you will remember of the driver, but you can't just define his entire legacy with that.
Tell me something. Do you think picking Sergio Perez as a replacement for Alex Albon was the right thing or not?
It was. I think it was, especially because, in 21, Perez did the job. Perez did exactly, I think, what Red Bull wanted him to do at that point. Should Checo have stayed as long as he did, this year, I don't think so. Who would they have put instead of Perez? I have no idea, and don't ask me that. And I think that's also what Red Bull does not know. But yeah, in 2021, he could have been there. He deserved it. It's a bit weird that he went from not having a drive to, oh, here you are in one of the best cars. But that's what happened, and I don't think it was unwarranted.
Yeah, I would have gone with Nico Hülkenberg. After
Fair.
what I saw with him, I would have gone with him. And even I think Alex Albon probably got the short bit of the stick because again, even in I think Albon talked about it as well that in his very first season, the kind of deficit that Checo had to Max, even Albon had something similar during his time. So it wasn't too much of a difference, just that the car was better, hence the results were better. So that did play a role. I mean, yeah, I mean, I still feel that if Red Bull has to hire someone, I think I would rather put Nico Hulkenberg in that car because probably in terms of talent and maybe application as well, he would be a better fit in that particular team.
Yeah, I think at the time it was the right decision because it's like, okay, well, they brought in these rookies or neo rookies who just have completely fallen short, so maybe somebody with some experience will do well. In 21, he generally did fall short again, but he put in the performances when he needed to. 2022 was definitely the gap was quite big, but the thing is 2023 this has been so much worse despite the fact the car is basically the same. He hasn't been able to hide behind Leclerc being competitive and close to them. It's just there's just been this huge void between him and Max.
Again,
Um,
Hülkenberg and Perez had as many Q3 appearances. It's incredible to say.
Yeah.
mm,
I do think his confidence was shot after what happened in Miami. I just feel that maybe that was the race that broke him, probably. Because, look, if a teammate can come from P9 and beat you, and he can do that in a race where there's no safety car, nothing, that, that's gut wrenching. That kills your confidence. Probably happened with Checo as well.
I need to check the exact stat, but I think in terms of qualifying average position, Verstappen was like 1.7, and Perez, I think I need to check the exact stat. It was like 8.2, and that's not normal. There were so many races where Checo was out in Q2 that it became normal for us. And genuinely thank you, Checo, because this season would have been so boring if Checo was performing as a normal number two driver. We should have had so many Verstappen Perez 1-2s, and then loads of Norris and Alonso and Hamilton podiums if the
Yeah.
season went a bit more normally. But the fact that Checo was never on the pace meant that we had so many interesting podiums with the two McLarens, with Alonso, with the two Mercedes. Um, so yeah, that's one thing.
By the way, what's your take on Alpine? I mean, we shit on them every time we get together. But what's your take on the French Ferrari? Where do you see it going? I mean, of course, we've gone through a lot of how the team is in turmoil, how celebrities are buying stocks in this particular team. But what do you see in the future of this particular team? Will it be sold off? Because I don't think it will be sold off now because its its valuation is close to 1 billion now. So it's a profit making entity. But what's the future for this particular team?
We said it in the last episode. Nothing. I don't know I don't know if they know what they want to do with the team. I don't know if they want to rebrand for another time. I don't know if they have plans for the junior drivers who are very good, but they are not offering any opportunities for them. I don't know if they have plans for the current drivers because none of them are going to win a title because they are painfully average, as Peter often says. And I don't know what the plan is for the investors. Maybe they want to sell it off, like instead of rebrand, actually sell it off to someone. I have no idea what they want to do with the team. It was a very attractive team to follow in 2021 because it seemed like they had a plan, and then you just see that they have been stagnating. And well, actually, I saw Peter still had something to say on Checo, so just going back to that.
Yeah, I think Miami ended up being a bit of a game changer because there was this. We could see that Max was catching him, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to get this amazing fight," and then Max passes him on the first attempt, and it was like, "Oh, well, that ended quickly." But that was essentially where the title battle ended, or where it was won. I think he just he's done this thing again this year. He's already said, "Oh, I'm fighting for the title next year." It's like you're not fighting for the title. Like you only the very best drivers can actually fight for the title against Max in the same car, and you're not one of them.
Yeah, just this is a controversial opinion from me, but I don't think anyone in Red Bull can beat Max at the moment. People are saying, when the Alonso rumors were going on just after Mexico, that he might get a drive at Red Bull in 24. I do not think Lewis or Fernando in the same car right now would beat Max, just because of, even if in terms of raw pace Lewis is faster. No one knows in terms of raw pace who's faster in F1, but maybe Lewis and Alonso have better raw pace, whatever. Verstappen is already in the team and has been there for 7 years now. The car is set up for him. So no one is beating that guy. And Checo, especially Checo, is not. But also, why does he keep saying those things? Ciaron said it before. At least just acknowledge that you are the number two driver and just chill as a number two driver and do your job as a number two driver. You saying that you want to fight for the title is not going to work ever, especially if you have seen thrice in the past that you've gotten thrashed by Max.
I think there are two different school of thoughts when it comes to the number two drivers. The first is your typical Valtteri Bottas, Sergio Perez, or Rubens Barrichello school of thought, where the team does not inform them that they are the second driver. The job that they have to do is finish behind the lead driver. So there's always this hope that maybe if I can challenge my teammate, I can win the title. On the other hand, there is this other school of thought, that is the Eddie Irvine school of thought, where he knew that he was being paid the big bucks. He'll drive for Ferrari. He'll get a Ferrari as a as a customer car, and he knew what his role was. His role was to be a supporting act to Michael, and that is what he did, and he was very happy with it. On the other hand, you have Valtteri Bottas, who has admitted that the time had an impact on his mental health. Sergio Perez is definitely going through the same thing, and Barrichello went through the same thing as well. So I think what Perez is doing right now is he's backing himself to be the best that he can be. Arguably not the best way to go about it, because if history has told us anything, it's the Eddie Irvine method that actually helps. That actually
Yeah.
helps you keep your sanity and even leave the team with big bucks, because he went to Jaguar and even extended his career after that. On the other hand, you have Bottas and probably Barrichello as well, who did not really, have the same kind of fame, or even had a certain level of bitterness once they left. So maybe something for Checo to think about. Maybe a reality check is the best thing. Probably he needs to have a chat with Eddie Irvine to, understand his mindset, because Max is
It's
not
funny
losing.
to say that because Kyron said the exact same thing a few episodes ago, like 2 months ago, the exact same line as you, that he should have a chat with Eddie Irvine. So I think that's a prevailing view nowadays.
Hmm. Well, it
Yeah.
sounds like we're all leading towards putting Checo as the disgrace of the year. Then,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
yeah,
More than Ferrari and Alpine. They have their own discussions to be had, but yeah, Checo for this one.
yeah.
And going into other disgraces, well, we have coined a more fun award as well, the Maldonado Award, the Pastor Maldonado Award, for the most incident prone, let's say, driver this season. So the candidates are De Vries in Canada, Stroll and Perez in Monaco. That was quite funny. Sargent just in general, even though even I think is that's a bit harsh because he was incident prone, but he was definitely not the Tiffy level. So who was your Maldonado of the year, Peter, to start with? At least maybe for a race with the nominees we have.
I think Sargent. I mean, certainly it's between him and Max for who is the most expensive driver. Max for his salary and Sargent for the repair bills that he left for Williams. I think he had the most crashes. I mean, off the top of my head, the ones I remember, he did that. There was during practice in Japan, and then he crashed twice in Zandvoort. Although the second time wasn't really his fault. There were going to be several others as well, but he seemed to be by far the most crash prone one of the five here. Although Stroll did have a couple of quite big shunts, most notably in Singapore.
Yeah. So I think I tend to agree with you. But For me, probably the biggest one was Checo in Monaco, because uh, he had, coming from the race in Miami where he lost out to Max, coming to Monaco, first he binned it at Sandevort in qualifying. Then even in the race, it was a bit of a mid race where he made too many mistakes. He didn't have a clear plan in front of him, and I don't know, it was all over the place. And again, I I talked about it a lot here. Expectation versus reality. You don't expect that kind of races from Checo. You do expect something similar from Logan because still a rookie. You expect similar things from Lance because, well, he's Lance. You don't expect it from Checo, and that is where I do feel that maybe to an extent I've, because even throughout his season he's not been that crash prone. So yeah, that was a bit of an anomaly for me. Even throughout the season, he had quite a few, but probably it all started with Monaco.
Yeah, that front wing incident, that front wing incident from Stroll in Monaco, that was comical because just goes into the wall, then goes into the next one, and yeah, it was raining, but surely Monaco in general, there was some funny Maldonado awards to be given there because there is a museum-worthy pic that was taken where is it Perez and Russell facing each other in the background while Alonso's going through. It's yeah, that race was fun. I still think De Vries in Canada was my Maldonado award goes to De Vries in Canada because he dive bombs Magnussen for what is I think P15 in a race where he has he has been told you might be out very soon. Please perform, and he performs by with the most nonsensical move of the season. So yeah, that was my personal choice because it's just funny and sad at the same time. You could see that De Vries was panicking, that he knew that his F1 career was on the line, and sent it down the inside. But especially at that point, the AlphaTauri was really bad. That was never going to stick.
The thing is now, probably, I think we've reached a point where you don't have that many paid drivers. Arguably, the two drivers that you could say are paid drivers are Lance and maybe Joe. These are the two that are left, and that's why we don't really see too many boneheaded moves that that were a feature of an F1 race earlier. So yeah, I do miss Maldonado sometimes because he did he did bring his own charm to be honest. Also Grosjean as well, who can forget? These two guys. Yeah,
Yeah, I
they
mean,
were fun.
Taki Inoue did say on Twitter that like F1 is boring and you need comedy drivers that are just there to crash.
And you need comedy drivers. I think the 2010s were nice. Well, the noughties and the 2010s were nice because we had drivers who crashed, but they were also fast. So you wouldn't be like, oh, they don't deserve to be in F1, and they would pull off the incredible performance every now and then. Grosjean fighting with Vettel at the 2013 Japanese Grand Prix, Maldonado winning a race. So you were not thinking, oh, they should leave the sport, but you knew that there was always potential for them to be fun. And recently, the only drivers who really did that were backmarkers no one cared about. I miss when one of the fast drivers was stupid when it came to overtakes, and we don't really have that anymore.
Yeah, they're all so vanilla to
Russell
be honest.
Russell gave us a glimmer of hope, but people attacked him so much for it that I think he got scared and stopped doing it, which is a bit sad. Well, at least
Yeah,
it makes me sad. You need one of those fast drivers to go for those moves, and you don't have that.
true.
So who would get your Maldonado awards then from
For me,
those?
it's Stroll, Perez, and Monaco, 100%.
Okay,
I mean, it's Logan Sargent.
yeah, different opinions for these ones. Again, good that you mentioned Sargent because the next award is the Rookie of the Year. Um, because of the atrocious pool of rookies in F1, in terms of who we would choose. the obvious one would be Piastri. So we had to include some of the Formula 2 and Formula 3 picks because there have been very good young drivers in the feeder series recently. We included Victor Martins from Formula 2, Oliver Behrman, and Gabriel Bortoleto for Formula 3. Three very good young drivers who I think all overperformed. Martins was a bit of, well, exactly the kind of driver I just mentioned, one of those fast drivers who kept getting into incidents. And I hope he gets into F1 because I think he would fill that gap we have of a guy a bit too overconfident for his own skill. I would still say that my rookie of the year was Bortoleto, just because I don't think anyone expected him to become a champion and be as consistent as he was. Who did you think performed well, Casual?
I think, look, Piastri is the obvious choice, and again, even if we talk about Oscar, there were a few things that impressed me a lot, but I won't go into that too much because Oscar is a bit of a token name that we've used a lot. For me, I think it's Ollie Behrman because not because of the race pace and everything, but there was something about his racecraft that reminded me of Max Verstappen in his early days. And his racecraft primarily in it was a race in Silverstone, and he was battling Jack Doohan, and you could see how he was inventing new lines in the wet, and that is something, that is a sign of a talent who is very proactive, who knows how to be right on the edge of driving regulations and not going over it. Something that Max used to do, and something that even Michael during his time used to do. So for me, that is something that has stood out when it comes to Ollie. He has pace. He lacked a bit of consistency, which probably Victor Martins did not. Overall, if I say, in terms of the season, Martins was the most more impressive guy. But when you talk about raw talent, and if you look at the ages, because I think Ollie is in his teens, Martins will be 22 next season. So you take all that into consideration, I'm going for Ollie Behrman. And next season, him versus Antonelli is going to be very impressive.
So if I look at these individually quickly, I mean, Bortoleto, I don't rate him. He basically just fell upwards because in the script it was supposed to either be probably Beganovic or Aaron that won the title in F3, but they broke kayfabe and eliminated themselves from the Royal Rumble. So Bortoleto was just kind of left there.
Maybe Gabriele
Do it
Mini was
instead.
up there as
Jack Doohan.
well. Gabriele Mini.
Oh, Gabriele Mini. Yeah, they were all. One of them was supposed to win it, but they just didn't. So it went to somebody who wasn't even in a driver academy and now is in one by default because he just kind of needs to be. Behrman, everyone was hyping him, and he won both races on the Baku weekend, but then he just slipped so far behind in what was an extremely inconsistent season for everybody. Where again, Pourchaire won the title just by falling upwards. Martins was really good in like Formula Renault Eurocup and then Formula 3 and won it, and then he's just kind of flopped, not really got into a stride in the same way that Dennis Hauger was amazing in Formula 3 and then just flopped in Formula 2. Piastri was, well, obviously good to be kind of close to matching Lando and close to beating him towards the end of the season, and also having to adjust to having what was a really bad car become a really good car and step up and perform equal to the task. De Vries, not really a rookie, very underwhelming for him. I think everyone got very excited at how easily he beat Latifi in Monza last year, but it just didn't happen for him.
I think that's one thing we can agree on. Sargent got a second season out of it, which a lot of people are not fine with. And so, yeah, from very good performing rookies to the very well performing strategists, I guess, because the next award is the Strategic Masterclass Award, where we give some limelight to the good strategies this season, which you might have forgotten. The nominees are Albon in Canada, who drove a superb race to keep much faster cars behind thanks to his very fast car in a straight line. Science in Singapore, very good drive from a guy who has to often be his own strategist, thanks to yeah, Ferrari just not really knowing what to do. He gave DRS to Norris for most of the race just so he could defend better against the faster Mercedes. Verstappen and Austin, who maybe won a race he shouldn't have won, and Gasly and Zandvoort for just going through the field from 12th to 3rd. Peter, who was your favorite drive here in terms of strategic masterclass?
Well, I think Sainz, because he took the initiative and did it himself. I think, and that's especially important to Ferrari because they can't really trust their own pit wall. I think as long as him, I'm going to mention is that one that should be pointed out is Leclerc in Abu Dhabi, because again he did the similar thing, is instead of just being passive and letting his pit wall pick a strategy out of a hat, he was actually thinking, oh well, if I try and hold up, hold up, was it Perez enough? He could get Russell to pass him, and then that could give Ferrari second in the constructors. It didn't work, but he was at least trying to work this out whilst driving. So that needs some credit, I think. But yeah, Sainz, because that was him obviously playing the game in terms of keeping Norris in DRS to protect him from Mercedes, but also knowing he can do it in a way that means that Norris can't then pass him. It's the kind of thing where most of the time we don't see it, but you can sort of play these games with DRS that you couldn't in eras when they didn't have it. Because if you just backed him up, it wouldn't work because he probably would just pass him. You'd be forced to just get as far ahead as possible and hope that he can keep up and not let the others get past and then pass him as well. Yeah, so for me, yeah, the Sainz one is the one that stands out the most.
I think, yeah, the Sainz one is interesting because I think that was an example of a driver thinking on his feet, something you don't see with Ferrari a lot. I mean, we see it with Sainz, but not with Ferrari. But I do feel that the one where probably strategy made the difference was what happened in Austin, because I don't think Max had the pace to win that race unless and until there was some areas where Ferrari, where sorry, Red Bull put together a strategy that would leave him in positions where he did not have to run in dirty air, or he did not have to spend too much time behind anyone. That was what they went with, and you could see. I mean, we always talk about the fact that if there is a team that is as if there is a team that produces a car that is as good as the one that Red Bull has, you could see them challenging Red Bull. And I think that's true. They can challenge Red Bull, they can challenge Max. But more often than not, these races that come up where Red Bull is marginally quicker or probably marginally slower than the competition and they still win. And I think these are the races that prove how advanced Red Bull is at this stage. And yeah, I think in my view, probably a race which Max should not have won and he ended up winning, it was Austin, and it was entirely due to the strategy.
That's a good point because even Verstappen said he was unsure that the strategy would work. He just trusted the team, which is what a driver should be doing in those situations, but he didn't see how that would work. He thought that he would eventually get passed by Lewis, and he didn't. So credit to Max as well for just listening and trusting his team, because it's obvious that at Ferrari the drivers do not trust their engineers as much, and it's just another sign that this Red Bull team is very well oiled at the moment. Everything just seems to work for them. I would like to give credit to Albon's drive in Canada, because even if he mostly defended thanks to his Williams being fast in a straight line and Canada mostly relying, well, Canada being a track where you mostly rely on the two main straights to overtake, he did a very good job at nursing those tires, because you still need to plan your exit at your
The hairpin.
exit to the hairpin. Yeah, your exit to the hairpin very well to keep those cars behind. And he was frustrating George Russell in the Merc. And it's funny that Russell eventually retired, because it looked like he frustrated a Mercedes to retirement. There was another thing going on with the car, but that's what happened with the facts. Albon this year has been very good on race pace, on tire management, on just following a set strategy, and that race was the prime example of that. Getting a P7 in a Williams should always be lauded, will always be celebrated, and he did exactly that. I don't think that most drivers of his caliber would have done that. It required Albon's uh, skill set because it suits Williams so well.
True, true. Even I think even Gasly did a great job in Zandvoort because if we, I guess many forget that at the same point in time, his teammate Ocon had a completely different strategy, and he suffered because of that. Because while Gasly was early to pit for the intermediates, that was something that Ocon did not do, and it ended up falling too far behind in the pecking order. And then when again the rain fell, even at that point, being able to nail the strategy, keep a Ferrari behind, and in the end keep a Red Bull behind as well to score a podium. Very impressive drive, and overall, there are moments where drivers make a difference, and I think Gasly did in Zandvoort because the car did not deserve to be on the podium at that time.
That's a good point. Again, on Albon, like he kept McLaren's behind and Russell, and when he had the 40-lap stint to do, he said that it was one of the most annoying drives ever because he cannot push at all. And then in the last 10 laps, he actually has to push on tires that are dead. And it just ends up being an extremely hard situation. So, yeah, I would go with Albon in Canada. I know Peter would go for Science in Singapore. Which one do you choose in the end, Casual?
Max in Austin, that's the one.
Okay, and that's very fair. Well, yeah, we had some good strategies this year, which weren't that famous because people have focused on, yeah, Ferrari messing up, and also just Alpine crushing. The next award is the appropriately coined PK award for the most stupid incident, we would say, this season. There were a lot of stupid incidents, a lot of media attention on non-issues, really, because of how boring the actual title race was. We have nominated Helmut Marko versus Sergio Perez. Marko actually versus Latin America, even though Mexico is not in Latin America, in South America, at least maybe in Latin, but not South America. Lance Stroll versus his personal trainer because for some reason he thought it was a good idea to punch his trainer and move him out of the way. Lance Stroll versus Bianca Bustamante, which is a very recent incident, which some of you might not have heard about. But Bianca has been liking tweets calling Stroll autistic. That was interesting in a month where not much happened. Lance Stroll versus Drogovic, because Drogovic thought it was a good idea to say that he is faster than the team owner's son. And Lance Stroll versus the Heat in Qatar, which is a good one because most drivers struggled with the Heat. Again, Peter, which one is your favorite here?
They're all quite interesting because I'm viewing this from the perspective of most cancelable statement. I mean, the Stroll versus Heat one. All I'm thinking is I know he was like he couldn't get out of the car and was essentially collapsing. So that one is a bit different from the rest. But yeah, Stroll Drogovic, he basically it was just after preseason testing when they were told that Stroll would start the first race instead of Drogovic, who'd done all the preseason testing, and he liked a bunch of tweets that were in Portuguese, basically complaining, that what Drogovic has been doing it and he's been setting all the good times, so they should give it to him and not the guy who's just broken his wrists. Yeah, Bustamante again. It was a similar thing. For some reason, they decided that she was liking tweets. For some reason, they decided to single Lance Stroll out, saying, "Oh, we should put Bustamante in that car instead of Stroll because he's autistic." I was like, "Well, she's not even an Aston Martin Junior, so she's a McLaren development driver." So it was just a very They just decided to single out Lance Stroll. Yeah, the trainer, he gave him a good shove behind the scenes, and then he did a very brief expletive laden interview afterwards. It wasn't very impressive his qualifying performance. And the Helmut Marko versus Perez was interesting because he was basically saying, "Oh well, he's not fast enough because he's from South America." It's like, okay, well, drivers like Ayrton Senna and the aforementioned Nelson Piquet and Juan Manuel Fangio, they're all from South America and they didn't have any problems with speed. In terms of the reaction that it's got, the strongest reaction does seem to be against Bustamante, but then Marco, he's the most prominent one in terms of that people, because everyone knows who he is, but people try to ignore him because he's just a bit of a fossil, and has since Dietrich Mateschitz died, he's become increasingly irrelevant. But because it's provoked such a strong reaction, I think the Stroll Bustamante would get my vote.
That's interesting. Because it was such a random event. You saw it on our last episode, just randomly scrolling on Twitter. It was weird. I think Stroll against his personal trainer was a bad event because we haven't seen drivers lash out against their own team like this in a while, at least physically. And as frustrated as he was, he shouldn't have done that. And well, I often say that F1 drivers are still humans, and we too often fans dehumanize them and make them look like robots who should be doing A, B, C, and not be showing emotions D, E, F because they are F1 drivers. However, just shoving your trainer aside when you had a really bad qualifying session is bad. So that would be my pick. More on Helmut Marko versus Perez. It was just such a bad statement because the entire team has been trying to defend Checo. And then, well, Horner has been doing his best job at defending, but also not really defending for the entire season. And then Marco just comes up with this statement where even Red Bull was like, "What the hell are you doing? Can you please shut up? You're annoying us."
I think, in my view, arguably what Marco said was the dumbest thing that he could have said. And that is, look, when you're at his age, being a loose cannon is something that Marco has gotten away with for more than a decade now. And I probably would have expected a bigger punishment. He didn't get it. Again, everyone has a different view on it, but I, for one, I'm not a fan of someone going after someone's nationality or anything like that. And pretty much that was a demeaning way of looking at someone who is actually part of your team. Whether he meant it jokingly, whether he meant had a completely different thought process, doesn't matter. He should not have done that. Other than Marco, to be honest, Stroll versus trainer, I don't have much issue with it, because I think something that Sebastian Vettel talked about. These drivers, when they are driving, their heartbeat is at close to 160, 170, and when they come out of their cars, it's probably the time when the adrenaline is it's at an all time high. So probably sometimes they don't do the best things, and even in the heat of the moment, something can happen. So I don't really make a big deal about it. Then when it comes to Stroll versus Bustamante, start using burner accounts. That's what I would suggest. I'll suggest that to both Dragovic and Bustamante, because look, when you reach a certain stage or a certain clout, everything that you do, even if it is not in the worst of intentions, they get scrutinized to such a massive extent that if someone has anything against you, if someone is after you, they'll actually catch you. So you have to be very careful about what you put out, what you like, because in such a politically charged environment, you really have to be as politically correct as possible. And that's why I think we do see drivers not making too many statements as well. So yeah, I think for both Bianca and Felipe, probably just keep a lower profile and maybe make a burner account, because such stuff is never going to work out for you guys. So yeah, if I have to talk about it overall, again, Stroll versus Heat, I don't really have too much input on this, because I wouldn't really categorize it as a PK award. However, the most important one, and probably the one that stands out for me, it's Marco versus Perez. And I think Marco should ideally have been either suspended or some action should have been taken, instead of a random apology and just getting away with it.
One nominee that, well, we brushed them. We didn't talk a lot about them in the disgrace of the year section. I think a mention for the PK award should go to Alpine versus Alpine, because they have been self-imploding, and they have been stupid towards themselves with all um, the changes in the direction and the drivers still not seemingly liking each other. I think they also deserve a mention,
I think,
especially as Casual said, there's not much potential for 24.
I mean, yeah, I mean, for Alpine, it's either they'll implode or they'll have something bad happen to them. They had two crashes this season between the two drivers. Twice they had a double DNF, and on both of those occasions, you can say that neither of those crashes were egregious, but yet that happened, and that's just Alpine for you. I mean, I hope the team gets better, but I have not really seen any signs. I don't really know how good Bruno Fernandes is. I rated Otmar highly. I really don't know where the team is going right now. They're losing my interest, to be fair, with the way they're going right now.
Yeah, and for more on Alpine, check out our last episode, which had in-depth coverage of the mess that is Alpine F1 team. Going into our last award, it's it's not really an award, it's more of just what we see happening in 2024. We're finally done with this long 2023 season, which I think we have covered maybe too in depth at some points and gave it more credit than what it deserved. But 2024, 24 races. This year only had 22 because Imola got cancelled. 24 races. Do we first think anyone will catch Red Bull? I don't think so. What do you guys think?
I think, well, I think they'll be closer. Because it's easy to say, oh, it's only one step further that Red Bull need to go to win every race over this year. But then, of course, there were going to be two extra races because Imola and Shanghai both got cancelled last year or this year. And it's possible that some other drivers would have won those races, but unlikely, particularly that early in the season. Because of the main difference between the beginning of next year and the beginning of this year will be how much better McLaren is. And because everyone's running by and large the same cars, and they're all taking the philosophy of, oh, just copy Red Bull, and knowing where the weaknesses are, but with no major rule changes to kind of stir things up, it's mostly going to be picking up where we left off. So I think it is going to close up, but it's still advantage Red Bull. And there's time for drivers such as Logan Sargent or Joe Guan Yu, for example, to sort of redeem themselves a bit or to actually prove if they do deserve to be there.
Okay, so when it comes to drivers, sorry, when it comes to the teams that could catch up with Red Bull, I think the gap would be smaller, something similar to what Peter said. But I feel we might be entering into a zone where we have probably a four-tier system in F1 once again, where Red Bull is the lead team. Then we have Ferrari and Mercedes, which are the chasing pack. Then we have McLaren and Aston behind them. And then we have the backmarkers, I mean, midfield backmarkers, whatever we can call them, from Alpine onwards. Alpine or Alpha Tauri. Alpha Tauri is one team that I expect will make a big jump. So I think that is how it might happen this time around. But again, it's a bit we are going into a bit of an unknown because McLaren, once it moved towards the Red Bull concept, it almost caught up with Red Bull basically. And Aston Martin at the start of the season, when they did something similar, even they made a big jump. Next season, both Ferrari and Mercedes will be doing that. Will they experience similar kind of jump? I'm not entirely sure, but you could see these teams making some gains because even though in 2023 the regulations were still a bit fresh, a bit immature, so there was still scope for error. Now they have learned a lot about these regulations. They know their cars better, and I'm expecting both Mercedes and Ferrari to put on a better challenge. But to beat Red Bull or to even catch them, I think it's too far ahead. I don't see that happening.
It's funny that we haven't mentioned Aston Martin because they seem to be the biggest competitor at the start of the season, and now no one really mentions them. It shows how much the dynamic changed throughout the season. Aston Martin apparently has been making good inroads because they finally understand their car from those rogue Twitter reports which have no sources and you have no idea where they even get the information from. I am a bit concerned with Alonso. I think he's losing the edge sometime, which we are not noticing as much because so many other drivers in that race for P4, so Russell, Leclerc, Norris, and Sainz made mistakes that Alonso was consistent enough to get P4, and this ended up being a really good season for him. But I still think that slowly he's losing some pace here and there, some clutch moments that you need in F1. So even if Aston Martin makes it, I don't think that they would fight for the title. And just because I see that Williams is also a talking point, hopefully they keep progressing. I can't see them. I can't see them joining the midfield just yet. But if they keep with their current plan of a few races where they really perform, I think that's enough for them, especially with the current state of F1. One thing that I'm not too sure is whose contract expires in 2024. You two would know better than me.
I mean, there are 10 to 11 drivers, something like that.
Most drivers do.
Yeah. It's
Who
I can tell you
who do you,
which drivers don't. I can say Max's contract does not expire. Lewis, George, Lando, Oscar. These are the 5 drivers whose contract does not expire. Other than that, uh, I think Albon's contract. I think Albon's contract expires at the end of the season. The thing is, right now, the seats that are probably going to be vacant are the ones. I mean, vacant as in before the start of the season, unless Ferrari announces something. Both the Ferrari seats they will be vacant. The Red Bull seat of Sergio Perez that will be vacant. Then we have uh, who the hell knows what goes on at Aston Martin because Alonso's contract is till 25, and Stroll has a lifetime contract at that particular team. Top When we talk about the top teams, that is the situation. Then you come to the middle and the back markers. Both Alpine drivers, they are out of contract. Both Sauber drivers, they're out of contract. I think Haas drivers are out of contract. Jesus, who's left? So basically
Alpha
everyone
Tauri
is.
as well. Alpha Tauri, they are.
Yeah, Alpha Alpha Tauri as well. They are out of contract. So yes, there's going to be, but the thing is, when you look at it closely, there might not be that much of movement in general. Maybe you might see a few drivers move here and there. I don't think Leclerc moves from Ferrari. I don't see Sainz moving as well because Fred is actually quite smart when it comes to these things. The combination works and he would not want to tinker with it. Maybe Albon makes a jump, maybe goes to an Audi. The Alpine drivers, maybe they make a jump, but it's you won't see too many. Uh, how should we term it? Too many groundbreaking movements at this stage. You won't see something similar to what Lewis did in 2012 when he moved from McLaren to Mercedes. Nothing like that is actually going to happen.
well, who do you guys think would replace Checo? Because I think that would really kickstart a domino effect.
It feels like it's being set up for Ricardo, but it depends if he can sort of stick it out in 2024 and be decent because he obviously breaking his wrists didn't help him. That kind of killed the momentum, but then he just didn't really pick it up again after when he came back. Tsunoda is
Wouldn't 35 Ricardo?
33, 34, something like that.
Wouldn't Ricardo be
he'll be
35 in 2025?
he'll be 36 in 25
Oh.
in 2025.
That's unreal. I'm sorry. Like, you can't get
Yeah,
it.
and he'll have been in F1 for 14 years by then, as well. With
Is
probably
that what you want in a top team? I'm not sure.
yeah, it's only unless their only logic is, oh well, he's a safe bet because he's experienced and he's raced against Max before. That's the only logic I could think of. Because
Plus, he sells a lot of merchandise.
yeah, I mean, Tsunoda is the most well prepared to do it because he's putting in the hard graft and getting into a rhythm now. And by then he'll be pretty experienced because that'll be his fifth season in F1. If he can sort out his temperament a bit, because he's the kind of person who's going to take this as a challenge to try and beat Max and will not be able to, and that will just get him all rattled like it's done with everybody else. And Lawson isn't experienced enough. He would need another year at least at AlphaTauri, I think, before doing to him what they did to Gasly and Albon.
Yeah, it's a
I
hard
think
one.
when it comes to so when it comes to Red Bull, I'd probably look again. I think I've spoken about it earlier as well. If Daniel performs similar to how he did in Mexico this season, he takes the seat. If he does not do something similar to that, I think they might go with Hulkenberg. Again, one inside info that I had at that point in time when the whole contracts were extended, Hulkenberg and Daniel were the two drivers who were on the short list, but because Hulkenberg's for Red Bull, for Helmut Marko and all, but what happened at that point in time was Hulkenberg's uh, the extension of 1 year was in Steiner's hand, and Steiner did not want to let go of the German, so that's why Red Bull could not get a hold of him. Then if then at that point in time again Ricciardo got injured. The plan was to give Ricciardo half a season. If he shows the proper improvement, he was going to get the jump. If Ricciardo was unable to do that, then Hulkenberg was the second choice. Now again, I think it will come down to the similar thing. If Ricciardo does not perform, then they might go with Hulkenberg as a stopgap. After a year or so, they will go with Norris. That's what they're. I mean, the way they've quoted Norris is something that has been there for a few years now. So that is one driver they might go with.
because I'm just checking. Hulkenberg is 36, right? He would be again, yeah,
37,
38.
38.
But
Yeah,
yeah, 37 going on to 38. Going on 38. That is too old to be probably prime Verstappen's teammate. They would get
yeah,
slaughtered. And that's the thing. I feel bad for anyone who would get that second seat. Even when Alonso was tipped, that was a fake rumor, but even when he was tipped to get that seat, I was like, Alonso would get beaten hard,
yeah.
I think. So, yeah, that's not a seat that I think many. Nico would be kind of the perfect candidate, I think, because if he is 37 and he still hasn't gotten a podium, which is a certainty, then he
Yeah,
will. I hope he's smart enough to be like, look, I'm gonna go there to get a few podiums, have a nice last dance in F1, finally get the drive that I have probably deserved, maybe
yeah.
get a win in a race where Verstappen gets a DNF. And for me, that's the most perfect choice in terms of, everything considered. But as Peter said, they're gonna go for Ricardo, and it's gonna be stupid, and he's not gonna perform, and he's gonna leave the F1, he's gonna leave the sport in disrepute because he's gonna be this guy who there are gonna be so many discussions on, was Ricardo really good? Yes, he was at some point, but he isn't. So
Look for
yeah, and
Ricciardo.
the
I
second,
think it's 2024 or bust for him. If he does not, if he's not able to perform well against Yuki, he'll just leave. I mean, he's spent enough time in Formula One. He's done enough. And if he does not see him getting a better seat, he'll probably leave because he has far too many ventures outside Formula One already. He's a huge name, and I don't think he is interested in driving an Alpha Tauri or whatever that team is called. He
yeah,
might retire
and
probably.
mm,
If
and the
there's no Red Bull, he's retiring.
and the second thing I wanted to mention was, yes, a lot of contracts are expiring and there are going to be moves for sure. But if we're talking about people joining F1, currently, with what we know, obviously 2024 Formula 2 is going to change everything. If Kimi Antonelli wins as a rookie at the age of 17 or 18, whatever, then that changes everything. But currently, who would you even say is in the running to join F1 should some of the drivers on the current grid underperform? So, yeah, Peter, who would you think even has a chance? We have discussed it in the past, to be fair.
First in line to replace Sargent, I would go for Franco Colapinto. That's going to happen at some point. Everyone's talking about Behrman. I'm still skeptical because he is just not fully delivering. With Kimi Antonelli, who knows? I mean, it's quite a risky jump to go from Freca to Formula 2. But I feel like I feel like even if he can't justify it on performances, people will say, "Oh, well, he's supposed to go into Formula One. We've just decided he's the chosen one," and that, even if it just flops like crazy. Jack Doohan is convinced he's going to make it to F1, but I think literally nobody else is, because I can't see him moving into Alpine anytime soon, because his results are just kind of average anyway. With the others, it's hard because like you hear about musings about, we mentioned Pato O'Ward, Alex Palau in IndyCar. Everyone's saying, or maybe the redemption arc for Callum Ilott is that he'll take this detour via IndyCar and EU Le Mans or whatever he's doing now, and then he'll come back to Formula One. But from that lot,
Nah,
I don't think
not
it's going to
happening.
happen.
No,
Yeah,
no
like
chance.
Colapinto and Kimi Antonelli are the only ones I can realistically, I think, for like 2025.
So when it comes to the drivers, I think the two names that's probably there are three names that stick out. It's Martins. I'm still not sure how Bortoleto is going to perform next season, but it's Martins, Antonelli, and Ollie Behrman. Now, when we talk about, and now coming to the seats that will be available, I think there will be one seat available at Haas, then there will be one seat available at Williams. These are the two seats that I think will be available. Other than these two, I
For
don't really see. Yeah, other than these two, I don't see maybe a seat at Alpha Tauri, um, probably.
well,
But
surely Sauber would one of Joa or Bottas would leave, don't you think?
yeah, both will leave. I mean, both will leave. One will have Hulkenberg. Apparently, Hulkenberg might go because of the German connection. The other seat, maybe Carlos Sainz. I don't know, but there
Or would
are
they really give a seat to Porsche because they kind of have to? I
yeah,
feel.
yeah, yeah. Poacher is also yeah. I mean, I completely forgot about him.
Exactly. No one mentioned Porsche when he is actually the one in, I guess, on
He's a
the
reigning
page.
Formula 2 champion. And yeah,
Yeah,
Poacher
and I
is
think
also there.
Porsche
Yeah,
is the one
he
that
might
if there's a queue in terms of who should enter F1. I would still
exactly.
put him above Drogovic just because of the attention and all. But if Sauber
Dragovic is
doesn't,
done. Dragovic is done. He won't make it to Formula One. He should ideally go to either Formula E or IndyCar and start his career because just standing
oh,
next to Mike.
endurance is the next big thing.
Who?
Endurance racing. I know you don't rate it too much,
Yeah,
but
Vec. But again, who will he be associated with? Which team is he probably going to join at this point in time?
he is an F1 reserve driver. I'm sure that they would take
They'll
him.
find something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, again, coming back to it, when it comes to Williams, I think if Antonelli does well, he's going to Williams. Steiner has already made it clear that he will try to get Behrman for 2025 because Behrman's a couple of FP1 runs that he did, he impressed the team a lot. So these are the two drivers that I think might. Problem with Victor Martins is that he's associated with Alpine, and even Alpine does not know what it will do with him. So who are we to make any prediction for that particular team? So that's the main issue, honestly, when it comes to Victor Martins. And I think even for Jack Doan, I think the biggest stupidity that he did during his career, whatever he's done, is he moved from Red Bull to Alpine in terms of the academies. If he had stuck with the Red Bull Academy, he would be in prime position. He would be someone on the level of Lawson or Yuri Vips, the drivers that were next in line to make it to Formula One. Because I think he comprehensively beat Isaac Hadjar and I can't remember the other guy. So when you take all these things into consideration, there are two drivers that at the end of it come that are the most certain. It's basically Antonelli and Behrman. I don't see anyone else making their way through. Maybe Pocher. Again, I don't know. Probably Saber is not that impressed with him. Maybe that is one driver that might be one of interest. Okay, so by the way, what's your take on McLaren? Where do you think this team can? I think we've touched on it a bit last time around as well. But do you think the team has the resources to actually be a contender? I think we touched about it earlier in this video as well, where we talked about uh, McLaren being the customer team and hence not having the you can say, hence it not having the prime. I don't know how you should talk about it. Hence it not being the primary concern of your power unit supplier. More often than
Yeah,
not, the priority will go to Mercedes. So do you think
yeah, I
that
think
could
that could
prove to
be
be a
an
hindrance?
issue. But genuinely, I think that could be an issue. Not, I'm not going to go too much in detail, but on this one, this issue in particular. But if they are in a fight with Red Bull just has the edge in every single way. So I I nearly think like McLaren's objective should be to try to be consistent second, because that would still be a big success to be above the Mercedes factory team and beating Ferrari when they started, from further down. Um, and if they do that, it's great for them, and it would be with their own academy drivers. Well, not Piastri, but Norris is their golden boy. So, I mean, fair enough if they do it, but I can't see them beating Red Bull.
Yeah. Imagine McLaren pretty much fair and square beats Mercedes this season, in 2024. I could Lewis would be thinking that maybe it's about time he makes a move from Mercedes to McLaren back again.
Yeah. Well, it was a good conclusion earlier with the drivers that could enter F1 that you made with Antonelli, Behrman, and perhaps Porsche. I hope he goes in. So yeah, those are our expectations for 2024. I would say that this is us done for this part of the podcast, and basically done with 2023. Just a last question. Um, do you guys think 2023 will be seen as a classic or a historical season in the future? Because, McLaren MP44, that was a car that completely dominated its year, and it became this iconic car for so many fans on posters. I I definitely haven't seen the Red Bull RB. Is it an RB19? Yeah, RB19 on
Yes.
posters. Yeah, I definitely haven't seen the RB19 on posters, just like the MP44 was for an entire generation. But do you guys think in the end we will be remembering 2023 fondly? Peter, what do you think?
Not massively. Um, it'll be in a similar vein of like 2013, 2002, that sort of thing. It doesn't quite have the esteem that 1992 and 3 are dominant seasons, but they're seasons that people still hold in high regard because 92 Mansell finally gets his title and Prost it's his comeback, and things were still Senna still kept the fights quite close even in much worse cars. The 88, again, people remember the car, but they don't really remember the races, except Monza because it was the only race they didn't win. Yeah, so not the best season, not the worst, but yeah, just not. It's not going to stand out much for on track action. More just for the amount of records that Max broke, I think.
I think this might be the season that is probably remembered as the one when Max Verstappen broke all kinds of records. I really hope he does not do one better next season because many people are going to turn off. Overall, when it comes to talking about classic seasons or classic races, no, 2023 is not going to rank that high. But that is one season that probably defines Verstappen's legacy. 19 wins in a season. I mean, if you just look back at the numbers that he racked up, and if you look back at the kind of dominance that other drivers had in his during their years, this is just too far ahead from everyone else, and maybe that's what it will be remembered for, the season where Max Verstappen dominated like anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was more than 1,000 laps led. It wasn't just about winning races; it was about leading all the laps. I think that's what really um, was obvious in this year. It was just him at the front and just chilling there. If we think about recent other standout seasons, so 20 2021, 2018. Where do you think this stacks up? Is it under the other battles for the titles in 16, 18, 21? Um, do you guys value more a season where you see such impressive domination, or those battles that go at least for most of the season?
I think within the last 10 years or so, the only seasons that feel worse to me, 2015, just because it was so uneventful.
15 was a wreck.
Yeah. 17 and 18 were good because, at least for the first half of the season, they had title fights in a similar fashion to 22. Obviously, 21 stands out for lots of different reasons. 2020 seemed good, but it's actually aged really badly. That's not a particularly brilliant year, but it has things about it that make it easier to remember, I think, than this year. So yeah, not one. It's not one where there are many races people are going to remember down the line. I think that's the problem. It's going to be remembered for Max and that car, but not for the races.
I
What do you
think
think,
the
Ashwin?
2022 season was similar to what we had probably in 2017 to an extent, not wholly, but to an extent. 2023 is it's basically a copy of maybe 2020, but Mercedes made a few errors. I mean, Lewis forgot red light meant stop at the pit lane and cost himself a race win. Then he, I think, crashed into Albon or something happened in the very first race that cost him. Then you had, I think he had COVID in one race, so something happened there. So it's basically Mercedes' fallings that caused them race wins in 2020. Otherwise, they could have had a similar season here. Probably 2014, 2015, 16. 16 again, it had a title battle, so that helped. Arguably, in my view, this one is somewhat similar to 2013, the second half, because there was a lot of inevitability to it. You can say P2, P3, there were fights for it, but overall, I mean, if you know that Max Verstappen is going to win the race and you're tasked with writing a preview piece, a post race piece, and stuff like that, it makes things a bit tough to keep things interesting. So yeah, in my view, I'll be praying if we have a better season. Something similar to 2021 is something I'd love to have once again. Except the
Yeah,
toxicity, by the way.
I think all of us are hoping for a season like 2021 again without the toxicity. Just to close this with my opinion, a lot of people have been saying how 2023 was the worst season they watched, and I think that says a lot on when they started watching the sport. Because even in recent history, 2015, Peter mentioned it quickly. 2015 was so bad. Apart from Max Verstappen being 17 and just going for moves where no one else does, like on, I think it was Felipe Nasser at Spa where he got
Spa,
overtake of the year. Yeah,
yeah, at the bus
going
stop.
around the outside. And then the crash with Grosjean in Monaco, where that was Grosjean's fault. Verstappen just went head on into a wall, 35G crash. Apart from like Verstappen doing things, 2015 was so bad. The cars sounded bad. The drivers were not interesting. Red Bull was nowhere. I think many people forget that Red Bull was nowhere. They got 96 and 93 points, both drivers.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah,
Kvyat
Kvyat
beat
got 96.
Ricardo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kvyat got 96 points. Ricardo got, I think, 93 points. And to give you an idea, that's nearly as many points as, I think it's less than what Piastri got this year. Piastri got 97 points, I think, this year.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
Red Bull was nowhere. And apart from Vettel joining Ferrari and Verstappen being mad and McLaren Honda being
Oh
hilarious,
God.
there was nothing going on that season. So, yeah, just to be optimistic for fans, if you thought 2023 was the worst one you had seen, you could have had 2015 where there was absolutely nothing. And that was what I thought. 2023 was fine.
Yeah. No, there's not much to argue there.
Well, I think after 16 episodes, I think it's finally time to put 2023 to rest. I think
Yeah.
I've said everything I can say about this year, and I don't need to talk about it again for a very long time.
Yeah, looking forward to 24 because I think we have completely exhausted the subject of 2023.
Mm. But yeah, You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. This is us signing off for 2023. Have a very happy new year, and we shall see you all in 2024.